How many times are we going to be talking about this Jeffrey Epstein? Look, let's just put this nonsense to bed. We're not going to find anything out. It's over. The Jeffrey Epstein case remains one of the most baffling and infuriating mysteries in modern history. Not because we don't know what happened, but because we know everything that happened, exactly what happened. And yet justice remains somehow elusive. You know, the supposed release of these files, flight manifests and documents and black books and client lists, was nothing more than a bait-and-switch operation by, I'm sorry to say, inadvertently perhaps, but nonetheless, Pam Bondi and others, serving only to raise public anticipation without delivering any meaningful answers. It was a mistake, a misstep that only fueled more skepticism about the government's handling of the case and involvement in the case. Instead of giving the public the closure it sought and seeks, Pam Bondi, and again, I don't think deliberately, I don't think she's an agent of the deep state, but her announcement merely highlighted how much is still being hidden. What should have been done was a simple declaration. Here's what we have. Here's what we know. Case closed. That's it. Move on. Instead, we're left in the dark with the biggest question still answered. Who really killed Jeffrey Epstein? Whom did he work for? What intel agency or agencies? And let's be clear. Epstein did not commit suicide. Let me say this again. Epstein did not commit suicide. You hear me? The official narrative that he somehow managed to strangle himself in his jail cell while two cameras mysteriously malfunctioned, and guards were conveniently asleep, and high-profile inmates were shuffled around is beyond absurd. Stop it. Stop saying this. Stop talking about this. It's over. The broken hyoid bone in his neck, the thyroid cartilage, petechial hemorrhaging, forensic experts say this. We've been through this a million times. I've been through this a million times with you, including former New York City medical examiner Michael Bodden, who concluded that it was more consistent with homicide than suicide. We know this. This should have been the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, for the official story. Yet, the establishment still insists that we look the other way. I've had enough of this. Declare the list and move on. You're not going to find out anything. I don't know what you think they're going to tell you. What do you want? Pictures of Bill Gates wearing some eyes wide shut mask? I'm just saying. The real question isn't whether Epstein was murdered. The real question is who silenced him? Who did it? Who had the most to lose if he started talking? Why did Ghislaine Maxwell end up being charged or prosecuted for human trafficking and never gave up one trafficker's name? And why, after years of promises about full transparency, do we still have no clear answers? Put it to bed. This is the great bait and switch. The files don't matter. Look, Pam Bondi, again, I like her. I don't think she knew what she was getting into here. Her handling of the so-called Epstein files, this release was nothing short of a disaster. She should have known better than to tantalize the public, especially this public, with the idea of explosive revelations. And what do we get instead? A controlled release of already known information. It's a limited hangout, heavily redacted documents, and absolutely nothing that implicated anyone not already in the public eye. We knew this. This was a miscalculation. She should have either said nothing or released everything without fanfare. Here it is. Or do you like to do in the JFK case? Here's 50,000 boxes. Go through them. There you go. We're done. Move on. I released them. Ta-da! People want, I hate this word, closure. If the government wants to retain any shred of credibility, it should have done what many suspected should happen or would happen anyway. Release some files. Declare the case closed and move on. And instead, the DOJ and others misjudged the appetite for real justice. And in doing so, they've made themselves look incompetent, or worse, complicit. Now, here's the question. What about the real power, the true power behind Epstein? Who funded him? One of the most perplexing aspects of the Epstein case is how he became so ostensibly wealthy. Epstein wasn't some financial genius. His firm Epstein and Company never made any major trades or had any major clients beyond the well-connected Les Wexner and others. The real question is, who bankrolled him? Why? That's what I want to know. Not the flight manifests, not the client logs. There are three primary theories. Number one, intel agencies. Many people believe Epstein was a front for an intelligence operation, likely involving CIA, Mossad, or other shadowy groups. His connections to Israeli figures like Ehud Barak and his rumored ties to American intel hint at a larger operation designed to entrap and blackmail powerful figures. If this is true, Epstein was worth far more alive than dead, until, of course, he became a liability. Next, billionaire benefactors. Epstein ties to figures like Les Wexner, the billionaire behind Victoria's Secret, cannot be ignored. Wexner practically handed Epstein a fortune, including a multi-million-dollar Manhattan townhouse. Why? What was Epstein offering in return? What do you think? And number three, the global criminal network. Epstein's ability to move seamlessly between financial elites, politicians, and the underworld suggests he was operating in multiple spheres. He was, perhaps laundering money for the rich and powerful. Who knows? Was he simply an intermediary for darker forces? Those are the issues. I'm telling you again, not the stupid client list that we already know about. Until we answer the questions of who propped up Epstein's empire, we will never fully understand the scope of his influence or the reach of his operation. And we also don't know exactly how much actual trafficking took place and how much of it was a bunch of people, women of age, who did this consensually. And how do you think you're going to get these women to come forward now and to testify after they've already made deals for their silence? They're saying, look, this is behind me. I'm married, I got kids, I'm done with this. You're not going to make me testify. So who killed him? That's the question. And this is a limited hangout. You're getting mad at Pam Bondi for not releasing files. How about not answering who killed him? Epstein's death was not an accident, and you know it, and it wasn't the desperate act of a man facing justice. It was a calculated, premeditated execution. But by whom? The intelligence hit. Think about it. If Epstein was indeed tied to intel agencies, his sudden removal suggests he had outlived his usefulness. He may, and probably knew too much, pose a threat to ongoing operations, or become some liability due to shifting political landscapes, intel agencies, and after all, think about this. Why wasn't this even looked at? How about powerful predators covering their tracks? Epstein's clientele wasn't made up of low-level criminals. It was a who's who of global elites. Former presidents, tech moguls, royals. Many of these individuals had everything to lose if Epstein started talking. And with prosecutors reportedly offering him a deal before his death, it's plausible that someone on the outside decided it was too risky to let him continue living. And then we talk about a prison cover-up. Even if the direct order didn't come from an intel agency or a billionaire or somebody in the government, someone within the prison system knew what Epstein had to have done to him. They knew he had to be silenced. The broken cameras, the sleeping guards, and the cellmate switch, and that cellmate. This is coordination, not coincidence. And the mistakes can't be repeated. Look, Attorney General Bondi's handling of the Epstein files should serve as a warning to those navigating similar cases in the future. America does not want vague promises, does not want half-truths and redacted documents and vague promises. It wants closure. So what should have been done? Simple. 1, released the files, declared the case closed. No grand buildup, no media spectacle. Just dump the documents, let the public see them, and move on. Next, acknowledge the reality of Epstein's death. Stop pretending this was a suicide. Say it. Admit the official story had holes in it and focus on what makes the most sense. Who had the most to benefit from his dispatch? Next, expose his funders, benefactors, handlers. The real story is not just who Epstein blackmailed, but who gave him the means to do so. America needs a conclusion to this. Quit tantalizing us with this. The Epstein case has loomed over American consciousness for years now. People aren't stupid. They know they're being lied to. We know this. Every botched media narrative you can imagine, every redacted document, every phony investigation only deepens the incredible distrust that we have in the institutions that we have here. If the government really wants to salvage any credibility, it must provide a definitive conclusion. That doesn't mean endless speculation about flight manifests and client logs and client lists and black books. And no. It means identifying who made Epstein Epstein, who protected him, and who ultimately silenced him. Now listen, Epstein's story didn't end with his death. It was merely the closing of one chapter. His network, his backers, his victims are still out there. And until we demand and get real accountability, until we refuse to accept carefully managed narratives, and until we push for answers to the real questions, justice will remain elusive at best. Epstein was a symptom of a much larger disease. There are other Epsteins out there. There have been. This is a story that thrives in the shadows of power, and the fight for the truth is far from over. So understand something. This is where we are right now. So let's just put this to bed. Here are the files. Let's move on. I'm frankly sick of it. You're not going to find out what happened. Nobody's interested in finding out what happened. You're not going to find out why you're not going to find out what happened. It's over. Okay? You can talk about this all day long. There's nothing to... It's just not going to happen. Unless you give me the information that I've suggested. What do you think, my friend? What do you think? Think this over. Think carefully. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. And comment as you see fit.